Went all in, play my cards right. Up the ante, won blackjack all night. Roll the dice, let it ride. Water the odds, I got snake eyes.
Entrepreneur Perspectives is produced by Quiet Loud Studios, a production company and content network. Learn more at quietloudstudios.com.
Very good to meet you, and sorry about last week's technical issues, but really just wanted to hear your story. And I looked at your website a little bit this morning. I come from a military family. My daddy was in the Army for 20 years. And so, kind of got that connection with you. Very interested to hear about your military service and then the submarine. I noticed the submarine model behind you there, which is really cool. But just would love to hear about that and hear about your story.
Sure, Mitch. Thanks for having me on. So, me wanting to be in the military started a long time ago. My dad was in the Air Force back in the 60s, 70s, early 80s until he retired. And so we moved a lot, spent some time in Germany. And I was about 11 or 12 years old. And I was on the outside of this airfield in a place called Simbach Air Base. And these airplanes were coming in. And they're like A-10s. And I thought those things were the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And then at that point, it was like, I'm going to fly those when I grow up.
Yep.
So my whole teen years was all about, preparing myself to go to the Air Force Academy and fly A-10s, as a career. However, life throws you curveballs. And at the time, my vision wasn't, good enough to fly, for the Air Force. And I was a teenager at this point, and
Right.
That's when one of the recruiters said, "Oh, you're never going to fly in the Air Force." And I said, "Then I don't want to go in the Air Force." And so that dream kind of got crushed.
Right.
And the next thing you know, I'm meeting this Navy recruiter that tells me about submarines. And she said, instead of flying airplanes, why don't you fly submarines? And if you think about it, it's the same concept, except one's in the air and one's in the water.
Right.
And I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. I've seen some John Wayne movies, where he's smoking a cigar and, spinning around on the periscope. And, that'd be something interesting to go do. So next thing you know, I'm signing up for the Navy, go through college, and I'm on submarines. And so I spent a good amount of time on submarines and, throughout the Navy, and retired after 25 years,
Okay.
which was a really good career.
That's awesome. Yep. So that must be an interesting experience to be in a submarine. I don't think just anybody can do that, particularly if you're claustrophobic, I guess.
Well, it is pretty tight, but, when you're submerged, it's like walking in a building.
Right.
So you don't really get a lot of movement in the submarine unless we're doing what they call angles,
Right.
and then angles and angles where you do really big
Right.
maneuvers. But, when you're on the surface, because of the curvature of the hull, it's not like being on a regular ship. You actually have a lot of motion. So,
Right.
submariners like to get out and get submerged as quickly as possible. So, it's more comfortable for us.
I got you. Yeah, we have something else in common. So you went to the University of Oklahoma. I was actually born in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So I'm a big Oklahoma fan just from being born there. Of course, like you, we were a military family, so we moved around a lot. We lived in Fort Rucker, Alabama, a lot of time at Fort Bragg. My dad was a Cobra pilot in Vietnam, and so he was in for 21, and then he got out. So tell me about your experiences in college.
College was a lot of fun.
Yes.
I remember those years very fondly. And most people that are in college, want to get out and, move on and get into the workforce. I wanted to do the same thing, but as soon as I graduated, it's like, boy, I'd love to go back.
Yep. What was my hurry? Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But no, it was good being, at the University of Oklahoma. Football was pretty decent at the time. Basketball team was like fantastic. And
Was that Wayman Tisdale? Was that when he was there? Or?
That was during the Billy Tubbs era, and Mookie Blaylock, and
Okay.
I think Wayman Tisdale might have been there also. And then so they had some really good teams at that time, and basketball was the sport
Yep.
sport to watch. So it was really good. That's one of the places I really miss. It's one of those things that being on the East Coast for so long, there's no way I could go back to the Midwest in the Oklahoma City area, just because the climate's a little bit different for me. But it's definitely a place I like to go back and visit. I don't get to go back very often, but when I do, I really enjoy it.
That's good.
It's
Okay, I'm
funny you
sorry.
mentioned Fort Sill. My son is actually in Fort Sill right now for 3
Wow.
weeks,
Wow.
doing some. So I think he's doing some leadership training. He's actually stationed in Japan with some unit out there.
Okay. Are you going to get to go out to see him, or?
No, he's going to be in school most of the time, and then
Okay.
I got a daughter graduating here coming up, so it's just too many parts to be able to get out to Oklahoma.
You're in the Virginia Beach area, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, good area. We spent some time up there. My brother-in-law had a boat that was there. I think he may have just recently sold it, but so we spent some time up in that area. Very, very nice area up there at Virginia Beach.
Yeah, it's growing pretty well.
Yep. So I noticed that you also have a degree in physics. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm leading you down the path of how all that translates into financial planning. So I want to hear about what you were thinking when you had got that degree. Did you have a career path in mind, and did that get diverted at some point?
So I got a degree in physics, mainly because, submarines at the time and still are all nuclear power.
Right.
So, as an officer on the submarine, you have to be nuclear trained unless you're a supply officer. So, to get ready for the nuclear training pipeline that the Navy has, I went down a technical path of, trying to get a degree that would prepare me for that.
Okay.
And so that's why, I kind of went that path. I love math. I love numbers. It's something that I always wanted to do from a technical standpoint. And so it just worked out that way.
Right. That's great. So when you got out of the military, did you have a plan in mind, or you just started looking around to see what you wanted to do?
So I was actually a Navy ROTC instructor at NC State back
Okay.
in the mid to late 90s.
Okay.
And so that's my first experience I had with, economics and finance and, marketing and things like that. And so I really love that degree program because of the difference between, what I learned in physics versus, the practical business world type things. So I really liked what I did. And so when computers started coming out and you got the access to the internet and online trading and
Yep.
all those good things, I started, trading stocks and, learning about, investments and things like that. So I did that when I was much, much younger. So as I was transitioning out of the Navy, I was actually looking, at different franchise opportunities that, I could buy into that were somewhat finance related. But I never found one that I really liked.
Right.
And the franchise headhunters, what I call them, knew some people out of Texas that were helping veterans transition into the investment advice industry.
Right.
And one day out of the blue, they called me. And I had about a year and a half left before I was retiring. And they said, had you ever thought about, becoming a financial advisor? And it's like, no, I hadn't.
Yeah.
But, it's just kind of like, the light bulb just went off. And it's like, wow, that could actually be something I enjoy.
Right.
So, while I was still on active duty, I started doing all the licensing and, preparing for joining the industry. And when I walked out the door, I was already all licensed up, ready to go, and
Yep.
hit the ground running that way.
So I noticed, also that I guess your primary focus was military personnel, people getting out of the military. Are you still kind of focused in that area, or more expanded now?
Initially, I was focused in that area because that's what I knew. And so, it was easy for me to use my experience in the transition process to kind of help people that were, similar to me, transition from active duty into, retired military into their next career, basically.
Right.
And it was just a good match. But as the years have gone by, I've been able to expand beyond just that because I've learned, about running a business owners and helping them with their financial planning needs. I know that as a business owner, not only am I focused on my business, but I have a whole bunch of other plays as a business owner that's not even what I'm transacting in that I have to keep spending. So you're
Right.
so busy and so focused on the business that you forget about yourself.
Right.
So, I can go in and help, business owners with that aspect of their life, basically, to make sure they don't forget about it. Because if they forget about it 10, 20, 30 years down the road, when it's time for them to retire,
No
they're not
exit
prepared.
strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we say too. A lot of business owners, they're really good at what they do. I've got a doctor that I work with, and she, obviously went to med school, brilliant doctor, and we worked with her on some insurance issues, but really, really, really insurance illiterate. It always strikes me that, she has that one track mind about what she's doing, and that's where you can really help people understand what they need to do to protect themselves, like you said. So, yeah, that's
Right.
a really great point.
That's another great profession right there that needs a lot of help because, they're so focused on their practice.
Yep.
They say doctors make the worst patients.
Yep.
And so they take great care of their patients, but then they forget about themselves. And so, being able to go in and help them, take that off, that financial piece off and help them plan for the future, can be very helpful to them.
So, what's the overall philosophy of your practice? Do you have a general philosophy that you guys like to follow?
So I have kind of like a tagline, and it kind of like explains what I think my role in helping people, with their financial planning needs is. And it's kind of, goes along the lines of I help people make their dreams come true.
Okay.
So, dreams can also translate to goals. But a lot of times clients, have a tough time at defining what their goals are and what the future looks like after their work life.
Right.
And so, we focus a lot, the psychology side of, not only preparing for retirement, but into retirement. Because, when somebody comes to me, one of the first questions and they want to retire, one of the first questions I ask is, what are you going to do when you retire?
Right.
And, most of the time it's like, I don't know.
Yep.
So, we really dig into that to try and help them figure out, what are they going to do? Because, they got a lot of living left in themselves after they retire.
Right.
It could be 10, 20, 30, 40 years of living in retirement. So what are they going to do that makes them want to get up in the morning and go do stuff?
Right.
So, that's a very important part of, what I do.
What are the challenges? I know in today's environment, it seems like as the gas prices go up and down, the market seems to want to go up and down, or when Trump says anything, the market swings. So I just, what are the unique challenges in today's, financial environment that you guys deal with every day?
Well, helping clients keep their political views and their emotions out of their decision process.
Right.
That's probably our biggest issue the last year or two, or even longer than that, because a lot of people, have gotten sucked into the news cycle of, oh, this is the worst thing ever, or this is the best thing ever, or your views are just completely awful, or, I'm no longer talking to my brother because he supported this politician or that politician.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've gotten so, polarized, against each other that when a client's viewpoints, they hear something on TV or the news or somewhere that goes against their viewpoint, they just start to get all emotional about it.
Right.
So, one of the things I've been really focusing on is to try and get clients to stop listening to the news, stop scrolling through the political news on their phone, stop listening to all the, bloggers and, other talking heads that, focus on one area. Because really, can they impact something that they hear about in the headlines? And more likely not.
Right.
So why are they having less joy in their life and having these headlines affect them when they have no impact or no ability to impact them?
Right.
So, teaching them to turn off the TV and not listen to any of the news channels.
Yep.
Don't read, articles that, are one-sided or are there to basically get you to click on them so they can sell you advertising.
Right.
Be careful about clicking on the same type of articles because they're the news feeds are just going to be more and more of those same articles. And if at all possible, just avoid it all.
Yep.
Because life is too short to be getting yourself wrapped around, nonsense that you really can't affect until the next election cycle.
That's right.
And the other thing is go vote in the primaries if you're not happy.
Yep. I got it.
That's where you make a difference.
Absolutely. So how many people do you have in your practice now? I noticed there were 6 on the website, I think, that had bios, but I didn't know if you had other employees.
I have another part-time employee, but they're more of a relationship manager for a very small number of people.
Okay.
But the ones on the website are the core employees.
Where do you see your business in 5 years? What's your long-term goal for the practice?
I want to continue to grow the practice and add additional advisors with different perspectives and different expertise that can kind of help, the firm's clients, continue to, work towards their goals and futures.
Right.
So that's very important to me. I'm also a big believer in the, don't set your business up to be that bus hits the owner scenario where the business goes away when the owner gets ran over by a bus.
Right.
So making sure that the business can run without me is very important to me. And then kind of like making sure that when I'm ready to retire, that the business is ready to continue to go, continue to be successful when I retire.
Okay.
And so I'm kind of focused from the business side of it on those type of things.
Okay. Interesting. I was going to ask you about, we also are in the insurance business, and so I was going to ask you just what role that you think that insurance plays in your overall financial plan, and are you guys also reviewing insurance policies and so forth to recommend different type products?
Yes, we do review all clients' insurance, their current insurance policies. We also, look to see what else, clients need from an insurance standpoint. And for a lot of people, what I find is that they need life insurance when they're younger, but they forget that they need it.
Right.
So reminding them why insurance is important and, how to use it to mitigate risk, in case one of the spouses, passes away, or you have, kids involved, or, all these different things, to kind of help protect them in case the worst things happen to the family.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about as well, and I'll give you an example of somebody that didn't listen to me, but the income is sort of the building block of the whole process, right? I mean, the income, and so, what happens if you become totally disabled, for example, what happens to that income? What happens to our financial plan if we don't protect that income during that accumulation phase? And I had a doctor who was a cardiologist. I actually sold him in some life insurance because he owned a restaurant. He was the money man behind this restaurant that he owned with his sister-in-law. And once I got him done, I said, "Well, Doc, how much disability insurance do you have?" And he said, "Well, I think I got 10,000 paid for by the practice. I'll net out about $7,000 of income." I said, "What do you make per month?" He said, 50,000 a month. And I said, "Doc, you can get 25,000 more disability insurance right now. No, nothing. You don't have to do anything but sign the application." He said, "No," turned me down. He ended up getting leukemia, missed an entire year of work, and then he passed away. And so that really kind of hit home about, hey, we talk about the financial plan and what we're trying to do, but that income is really the building block of that whole process.
Yeah, I agree. And so you have to find out some way to protect it.
And then I guess the other item I always talk about is long-term care and how that can impact your retirement savings once you get into the retirement phase of, do I have a major long-term care issue? So I don't know if that's something you guys talk about as well.
Yeah, most of the clients that come to us are, a little bit further along. Long-term care is more of a, self-insuring
Gotcha.
Case at that point. Very few of them come in young enough and healthy enough to get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoy hearing about your practice, and I hope you've enjoyed doing this. We wanted to hear about your business and anything we can do for you. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we leave?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground. I enjoyed doing this and appreciate you inviting me.
Well, you've got a very interesting story. When I was reading your bio, I was like, wow, this is very, very, very interesting. You've had a lot of nice experiences. So,
Yeah, I think I've had a pretty good life so far.
well, great.
Hopefully it's a lot longer.
That's it. Keep it going. Yep. So
That's right.
Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Entrepreneur Perspectives. This show is produced by Quiet Loud Studios, where we create podcast writing and original media. Learn more at quietloudstudios.com.